Tress sat upon her porch, leaning against her mother, and watched the horizon. She held the last cup Charlie had sent, the one with the suicidal butterfly. Her lukewarm tea tasted of tears. It wasn't very practical, she whispered to her mother. I'm Ben Grange.
I'm Bethany Davidson, and this is Cosmere Journeys.
In each episode of Cosmere Journeys, we read the chapters of the week through the lens of a specific Cosmere shard. The shards are the deities of Brandon Sanderson's literary universe, and each shard encapsulates a specific attribute. The shard lens we will be looking through this week is Valor. But before we put on our shard lenses, let's play a quick game of Would You Rather. Bethany, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I have tried to theme these questions after today's chapters. So, would you rather live out the rest of your life on a salty rock in the middle of the ocean or go to your ex's wedding reception?
Oh my God. Okay. That's tough. Neither. Okay. Logically here, a few days on this rock sound better than attending my ex's wedding. But that's just a one-day ordeal. I feel like I would have to go with just suffering for one day and attending my ex's wedding rather than an eternity on this salty rock. But man, that's not a fun answer.
I didn't set you up for success there. I think if we really applied these to these chapters, or this book even specifically, maybe spending the rest of your life on a salty rock with a partner that you love wouldn't be too bad. But I kind of agree with you. I would rather go to an ex's wedding reception than be alone on a salty rock for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's true. If you add in the partner that you love is on the rock, then that sounds like a much better option. But I'm picturing, like, if Tress stayed on this rock in this book, there's no partner she loves on this rock too. So, yeah, I think I have to go with the wedding.
Yeah, I agree.
Today's episode will cover chapters 5 and 6 of Tress of the Emerald Sea, The Bride and the Inspector. In Chapter 5, Tress has just heard the news that Charlie will be returning with his new bride. She's sitting on her porch, crying into some salty tea from the last cup Charlie had sent her, and she talks to her mother about her regret of not saying more to Charlie before he left. She works up the courage to attend the arrival of Charlie and his family, and when she's there, she quickly notices that the man on the ship is not Charlie, and the Duke announces that after an unfortunate accident, he has adopted his nephew to be his heir. Later at the welcome party, one of the Duke's servants tells Tress that Charlie tried so hard to deter the princesses, just like he had promised. But the Duke figured out what he was doing and sent him to the Midnight Sea, where he was taken by the sorceress. Tress tries to convince the Duke to pay Charlie's ransom to the sorceress, but after he declines and after a couple months of turmoil, Tress decides to go save Charlie on her own.
In Chapter 6, we are introduced to Tress's parents. Lem, her father, has an injured leg and can't work. Her mother, Olga, knits socks and fixes clothing for a meager income. Tress and her parents discuss the idea of leaving the island to save Charlie, and her mother is firmly against it. Her father, though, despite knowing how dangerous it will be for Tress, encourages her to follow her heart. After some persuasion, her mother agrees. The first and biggest obstacle in Tress's journey is before her. How will she get past the cargo inspector and off the island? Together, she and her parents hatch a daring plan for Tress to escape the island, which will first require Lem to do some advanced fathering. But we will have to wait for Chapter 7 for that.
This episode of Cosmere Journeys is brought to you by the 3030 Writing Challenge. 3030 is a community with thousands of writers from all over the world. The challenge takes place 4 times every year, and the goal is to write 30,000 words in 30 days. Complete each goal, and you'll have more than enough material for a full novel. So if you struggle with motivation or consistency, or even if you just want a community to cheer you on as you work on your book, join 3030 at 3030k.com. That's THIRTY30k.com, and get ready to make some real progress on your novel.
Almost every U.S. citizen knows the story of September 11th, and many more throughout the world do as well. I remember at 11 years old watching the news with my mom before school. She was on the phone. We had this red landline phone attached to the wall with a huge curly cord connecting the phone to the receiver that could stretch all the way across the house. My mom was on this phone talking with a friend, crying, and I was in shock at what I saw on the TV. That day, the fear in the air was as palpable as rain. It was a moment that defined U.S. history forever, but something I didn't learn until later in life was that aside from the attack on the Twin Towers in New York, as well as the Pentagon in Virginia, a fourth attack was intended for the U.S. Capitol building in D.C. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, airline passengers across the country watched as the terror attacks unfolded. One flight in particular, American Airlines Flight 93, was delayed by 42 minutes. Had the plane taken off at the appointed time, those passengers would never have seen the news about the Twin Towers in New York. But the delay gave them the chance to see the chaos and the terror before the flight took off. Then, about 45 minutes into that flight to San Francisco from Newark, New Jersey, hijackers killed a passenger and took control of Flight 93. Because they had seen the news, those passengers knew they were on a suicide mission to destroy an American landmark. Rather than sit back and let the attack continue, the passengers banded together to fight back. And in the struggle for the control of the plane, they diverted the attack away from the U.S. Capitol and crashed the plane in a field in Pennsylvania. All 44 passengers on that airplane died, and in the process, they became heroes. A monument now stands in the field in Pennsylvania where that airplane crashed, which is a testament to the valor of those passengers who stood up to terrorism in real time and gave their lives so that others could live.
I was just shy of 4 years old growing up in Canada, and I remember not fully understanding what was happening during this time, but seeing my mom silently watching the news and seeing scary things on the TV and just sensing so much uneasiness and fear. I honestly, to this day, didn't know the full details of Flight 93. I knew there was an unsuccessful hijack, but I have chills hearing the details of the passengers working together to divert the plane. It's honestly awe-inspiring that in the face of imminent danger, they had that determination and bravery that it took to band together and stop the hijackers. But I am wondering, Ben, how are you going to tie this into the Cosmere today?
Yeah, I think valor is one of those concepts that feels unobtainable at times, like great feats of courage in the face of danger, especially on the battlefield. How often are we faced with dangerous situations, and how often are we faced with battle even? When it comes time for us to stand up to the danger around us, will we have the courage to do so? And this story reminds me of the bravery of everyday people. Just like these great American heroes, we don't have to be on a battlefield to stand up and take action in the face of danger. And when I think of what Tress is about to do in these chapters, I can't honestly think of a better shard than Valor to read these chapters through.
That's such a great point, and I can't wait to explore it more. So let's put on our shard lenses now. Ben, where did you first see Valor in these chapters?
So I think the first time I saw Valor show up in these chapters was when Tress, knowing that Charlie had been married and that their story together was coming to an end, she found it within herself to attend the arrival party and even be happy for Charlie. If I put myself in her shoes, just like we did with our game earlier, I can imagine how hard it must have been to hear the letter from the Duke and believe that Charlie was coming back as a married man. So just like with our Would You Rather game earlier, it is almost like getting an invite to your ex's wedding reception. And that is a hard thing to deal with and can even be a frightening prospect, facing someone you loved and knowing that they are gone to you forever. And Tress, she bravely stands up and says, okay, this has happened. There was nothing I could have done to stop it, but I'm not going to run away. I will face this with bravery and dignity.
Yeah, I agree. And putting myself in Tress's shoes in that moment, I'm not sure I would have been able to have that frame of mind so quickly after finding out such heartbreaking news. It's honestly really inspiring that she wanted to show up and be happy for Charlie in this super difficult scenario.
Yes, it absolutely is. I think she did have about a year between the time that Charlie left and the time of receiving this notice that he was coming back married. So I can assume that she had some time to process. But even still, it would have been extremely difficult to face that head on. So, Bethany, where did you see Valor first show up in these chapters?
I think the first time I really saw it on display was when we found out about Charlie's voyage to the sorceress. Not only did Charlie stay true to his promise to Tress to deter these princesses, but he didn't stand down after his father caught on and threatened to send him away. When I think about his position here, it probably would have been easy for him after a year away from Tress to put more value for his own life over the promises he made and tell his father that he would stop with all the sabotage and marry a princess instead. Tress even notes earlier in the chapter that when she thought he came back with a bride that she didn't blame him, but he held his ground, knowing he might be headed to his death. Valor, by definition, it's a specific type of courage while facing great danger, especially in battle. And Charlie perfectly displays this here as he heads into the battlefield ahead of him, sailing the midnight sea and facing the sorceress.
That is such a great point. I really love the way that you put that. I can just imagine Charlie in this boat sailing to the midnight sea, chin high and unwavering in the face of the danger that is before him. That truly is an act of valor, and it's something I would aspire to be brave enough to do for my loved ones. This ties in so well with the last line of this chapter, when Tress decides that she would have to go rescue Charlie herself. I think this mirrors exactly what you just said about Charlie. He goes to face the sorceress so that he can be with Tress. So Tress decides to do exactly the same thing, face the sorceress so she can be with Charlie.
I love that because they're both so unwavering in their valor when it comes to each other. Despite in this moment having no ability to contact each other, they don't know if each other are even alive. And in chapter 6, we see Tress start to prepare for this battlefield. She starts by talking with her parents, convincing them over some pies that she must try to rescue Charlie. She recognized that although Charlie may be suffering, she needed to take her time here in planning to ensure she had the best chance of successfully rescuing him as possible. Alongside her parents, they study and take notes of the comings and goings of ships to the island, learning as much as they could about the people and the shipments on these boats. It would have been easy in this scenario to lead with emotion because she knows Charlie's likely suffering and his time could be limited. But I want to point back to a part of that definition of valor because it requires a strength of mind or spirit that enables a person to encounter danger with firmness. Taking her time with these preparations and using her resources as much as possible by including her parents to help her, to me this shows her strength of mind that's allowing her to approach this very dangerous situation with a level head and determination to give this battle her all.
I think in the end, everything we've talked about so far comes down to an individual's willingness to stand up in the face of danger to protect the things that they care about, family, friends, and even national landmarks. Valor is not something you know that you're capable of until you meet your moment. This is actually something I talk with my kids about all the time. As kids do, they get scared by the simplest things, and often that fear will drive them to shrink away, to hide behind me, and hope that I will fix the problem for them. But whenever this happens, I try to get on their level and understand that fear, and I always tell them this one thing. It's okay to be afraid. If we never felt fear, we would never need to be brave. So the only way to be brave is to face that fear and challenge it head on. So I'm going to take these chapters as a reminder for myself. When my moments come and when I'm faced with unimaginable danger, I will commit to defending the things that I love the most in this world.
It's time to examine a passage of the Cosmere and use the realms to find hidden meanings in this passage. Realmatic theory analysis is a close reading of a scene, paragraph, or a sentence that seeks to understand it from the three realms of the Cosmere: the physical realm, the cognitive realm, and the spiritual realm. In other words, what the characters are experiencing through their primary senses, how they are perceived by each other and themselves, and how their souls are connected. So Ben, what passage are we looking at for realmatic theory analysis today?
I want to look at a passage from chapter 6 where Tress and her parents are talking about what they will need to do if Tress wants to pursue Charlie. Here's what it says. I still think it's a terrible idea, Olba said. Lem nodded. It is. But a terrible idea executed brilliantly has to be better than a brilliant idea executed terribly. I mean, look at pelicans. True, Tress's mother said. But are we capable of either type of brilliance? No, Tress said, but maybe we can take a whole lot of little steps that, when looked at together, might seem brilliant to somebody who doesn't know us. So the first step is to look at the physical realm. What are these characters feeling, and what is before them?
You know, when I first thought of this, I honestly felt a little bit stumped because this passage is entirely dialogue. But I'm going to point to, I think, what they're seeing in this passage. And when I envision this scene, I think Tress and her parents are seeing the people they love the most as they're gathered together in a pretty difficult conversation.
Yeah, that's a great image to bring up. I can also imagine they're gathered around the table. Given their status, it's likely a simple table, but sturdy and reliable, like their family unit. It's something that they can rely on, just like they can rely on each other.
Oh, I love that thought, and I think it perfectly reflects their support for each other. This table might be old, and maybe it even has some dents and some nicks in it, but it remains intact and sturdy, just like their family does in the face of challenges. Now let's move on to the cognitive realm. How are these characters perceived, and how are they perceiving each other?
I want to focus in on this idea of brilliance and Tress's perception that she and her parents are not brilliant, and nor is their idea. Let's talk about the concepts of ideas and brilliance just for a moment. So often, we think that if an idea is not brilliant, we shouldn't do it, and that in order to create something amazing, we first need to have a brilliant idea in order to make it work. One of my mentors in college would always say to me in my creative writing classes that ideas are cheap, ideas are everywhere, and you don't need a brilliant idea to create something amazing, because the idea isn't what makes the creation what it is. The person behind the idea and the process that they go through, that is what makes something truly great.
I love this because Tress's entire family in this passage is feeling self-doubt as they all come to this conclusion that they aren't capable of brilliance. But Tress says something so impactful here. She points out that a bunch of little steps, when all added together, might seem like brilliance to someone who doesn't know them. It all ties into an overarching message in the Cosmere, which is journey before destination. That final goal of crafting something brilliant seemed impossible and daunting to them, but it's a great reminder to approach everything with an appreciation for those small steps. Focusing on the present rather than being scared of the future and learning and growing from the challenges along the way might just be what Tress needs to get her through this journey.
I love all of that. It's such an impactful thing to think about, and something I think we can all use as a guide rail for how we approach the concepts of brilliance and ideas. We don't need to have brilliant ideas in order to work towards something that can be brilliant in the end. Now let's move on to the final step of this process, the spiritual realm. How are these characters and their souls connected?
Now, there's, of course, this obvious connection here because they are family, but I also want to point to the way they're consciously choosing to maintain and nurture their connection in this passage. Tress is bringing to them an incredibly scary scenario, and she's telling them that she wants to risk her life to pursue Charlie. I can only imagine what this would feel like as a parent. I'm sure they're feeling an innate desire to protect Tress, and they might want to keep her home and safe from this danger. But instead, they're openly discussing the situation ahead of her as a family. And despite everyone's fears about this scenario, they're approaching it as a team, which is nurturing their connection together.
I love that you brought that up because there is such a real, almost tangible connection about belonging to a family, especially a family that loves and cares for each other. Now, this can be a biological family or even a found family, but that connection is real. I notice it in my life all the time. And because of that connection, I have a desperate desire to keep my family safe and secure. So when something big happens, something important or scary or even dangerous, that sense of connection propels me towards the needs of my family unit. Sometimes that requires me to compromise my opinions or beliefs and stand with my family to support them and carry them through the danger. Sometimes it means unifying with them behind a single idea that will help us move into the future together. That is exactly what Tress and her parents are doing right here, setting aside their differing opinions and unifying behind something that must be done.
It's time for our final segment of the show, Hoyd's Advice. Listeners, if you're struggling with something or if you need a morale boost, send us a message and we'll share it here with a story to help you through the problem.
Today we have a message from a friend who wished to stay anonymous, which says, I recently got a new job that is an absolute dream. I love my coworkers, the office, and the work isn't too unbearable. The main thing I am struggling with is feeling like I don't belong. Everyone is so smart and the job is such a leap from where I was that I feel like I'm going to wake up and start falling back down. Have you ever felt like this, and what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. This reminds me of a story Hoyd tells in Rhythm of War. It's called The Dog and the Dragon, and it's personally my favorite of all of Hoyd's stories. In this story, a dog watches a dragon flying high in the sky. He sees its power and magnificence, and he's in awe of its perfection as he watches it soar above him. From that moment, nothing else mattered to the dog except becoming a dragon himself. So he tried. He grew seeds to roll around in to appear like the scales of a dragon. He practiced speaking with a grand voice like the dragon. He soared from a cliff hoping to fly like a dragon. But every time he tried, he failed. He didn't look like a dragon, didn't sound like a dragon, and didn't fly like a dragon. And the other dogs laughed at him until he eventually gave up hope. Feeling crushed, he fell asleep thinking that he was too small, too quiet, too silly to ever become a dragon. He woke up soon after, confused by the sound of panicked voices, and his family's youngest child had fallen into a small well, and it was too narrow for anyone to go in and save the baby. The dog acted quickly, working with their son to tie a rope to his harness and lower him down the well, and the dog saved the baby from drowning. That night, the little dog snuggled into a warm bed beside the fire, hugged by the farmer's children, his belly full. And as he did, the dog thought to himself, I doubt any dragon ever had it so good anyway. I love this Hoyd tale so much, and to me the moral of the story is that the dog's real value is in who he is already. He cares deeply, he keeps trying, and he has the courage to continue showing up in ways a dragon couldn't. I'm sure your coworkers are incredible in their own ways, but instead of judging yourself for ways that you're different from them, I would encourage you to recognize the unique strengths that you yourself already bring to the table.
I really love the story of the dog and the dragon, and I think it ties in perfectly with this example. In fact, Brandon Sanderson once told me that this is one of his favorite scenes in all of the Stormlight Archive series. And to me, that just shows what an impactful story this is and how universal it is for most of us. We all go through periods in our lives where we feel like we don't belong. Personally, I can relate so well to this. When I was growing up, I moved probably 6 times in 6 years, and I went to different schools in every single one of those years, from 6th grade all the way till 11th grade. And every single year, I struggled with the exact same feelings of not belonging anywhere, finding new friends, finding new places to fit in, finding out who I was in all of these different places was incredibly difficult. And I know that it is very hard for people like you in this situation. You've got a new job. You've got new people you're surrounded with. They all seem to have everything going for them. They all seem to fit in just right into their own unique stations at this place. But you got that job for a reason. You had to apply. You had to go through the interview process, the same as everybody else who was looking for that job. Everyone answered those same questions the same as you did, and you gave just the right answers at just the right time to be accepted in that place as you are. So you earned that position because of who you are and what you've done, and you belong there just the same as everybody else does. So just like Bethany said, give yourself some credit and don't be too hard on yourself in this kind of a situation, because ultimately, just like with the dog and the dragon, you can try so hard to be a dragon, and you can try to grow scales, and you can try to breathe fire and talk with a deep booming voice and fly through the skies. But ultimately, that's not why they brought you into that role. They brought you into that role because just like the dog, the farmers needed somebody to watch after their children while they did their daily work. And you can fill that exact role that you were brought in for. So be the dog and you will be loved. This has been The Bride and the Inspector, Episode 3 of Cosmere Journeys. I'm Ben Grange.
I'm Bethany Davidson, and to end every episode, we speak the ancient oaths. Life before death, strength before weakness, and, most of all, journey before destination.